What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Josh. This is OverlandingNow, and we made some progress this weekend, and we made a lot of changes. Things that I have been using for a while stopped working, and I don't know why. So I eliminated them entirely, and I reinstalled a completely new system. And with that system is going to be an isolator for my alternator to run a spare battery in the back of the Subaru. A lot of good stuff happened this weekend. And on top of that, my roof's not leaking from the Prinsu rack. And it's been raining like crazy. So that is a positive. So what we're going to talk about today is just the things that I've done this weekend to get this vehicle back to where I need it to be. I'm hoping that the changes I made will help you guys, and I hope that they'll work on my upcoming trip. Only time will tell, so stay tuned and we'll talk all about it. All right, so before we get started talking about all the changes that were made this weekend, I have to shamelessly plug myself. And if you guys have not followed us on Instagram, I would love to have you over there on Instagram, and I will put our Instagram right here somewhere so you can come and follow us if you're into the whole Instagram thing. And if you're into the photography, landscape photography, storm chasing, storm photo, that whole scene, I will also put our other Instagram here because we'd love to have you along for that. I just started it and I like doing it, and I would like for you to come along if it's something you like to do or you're interested in. Okay, so the thing that I've been working on all weekend, the trigger system failed on me. And I know how big of a proponent I have been for the trigger system, and it failed. So about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was out chasing the storm not too far from my house, and I was getting back on the road. And if you guys have watched any of the other videos, you know that I've said before, I've used my off-road lights, my A-pillar lights and all of that stuff far more on-road than I ever have off-road. And this was one of those times. I was coming home, it was getting dark, and I always turn them on when I'm in the middle of nowhere in case a deer runs across the road. In Ohio, there's tons of deer, and especially right at dusk, they're all very active. So I was coming home, it was starting to get dark, I had the lights on, and I was about to pass a car, and I went to turn them off, and they wouldn't turn off. So I'm like clicking the switch, and I'm like trying to hold it closer, to the controller. I'm like trying to figure out what's going on. And then I'm like, what the heck? So I turned my compressor switch on, and my compressor came on. And then I'm trying to turn the compressor off, and the compressor won't go off. So I had to pull over on the side of the road, disassemble the trigger system right there on the side of the road. Luckily, it wasn't raining, but that was it. I only need like one incident like that for me to not ever be able to rely on that piece of equipment again. Now, the bad part is I also have this in our new Ram Power Wagon. I've been such an advocate for them, and they don't pay me, and they never did, but it just was easy. It was simple. Anyone can do it, and I think that's something that's awesome. People just have the ability to do these sometimes can be considered complex things, and they could have their lights controlled without anything super crazy. Well, I don't know if there was a Bluetooth remote. I don't know if it was the connector that you connect to the trigger system. I'm not real sure, but it doesn't matter. I pulled it out, and last week I received my new my new auxiliary light controller, and I went with Auxbeam this time. So first and foremost, Auxbeam doesn't pay me. They didn't give it to me. I bought it with my own money. I just wanted something that was economical. It wasn't extremely expensive, and that was relatively easy to install. I knew nothing was going to be as easy as the trigger system, but my question is now, after all that has passed, was I sacrificing its long-term functionality just for an easier install? And this is a hardwired system where I had to run wires into the car. And if you guys have never ran wires inside your Subaru Outback Wilderness or your Subaru Outback whatever year, I have a video, and I'll put that up here, of how you can do that. It's actually really easy, and now that I already have the hole in the grommet, it was really easy to run all those wires through. But I decided to go with this because, like I said, it was inexpensive, but it had great reviews, and it has 6 switches on it that is more than enough for me. This car has kind of changed. It's definitely still like an overlanding car, and it has all of those capabilities but I will be using it mostly for like storm chasing and photography stuff and like solo trips and that type of deal. So, you know, we have a lot of stuff that I'm waiting on right now to come, and then I'm going to install that this week as well, and it's going to set the whole roof rack up, and then everything will pretty much be done, minus I am adding an isolator switch to run power to a rear battery that I purchased today that will be my auxiliary battery. So that will give me power for my fridge, all my camera gear, everything I need, and it'll be in the back in the wheel well where the compressor is, and then that will pretty much round out the vehicle. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to be tinkering with it. But so as far as the Auxbeam controller is concerned, it is more difficult, but it's not hard. There's just more steps in the process. So I did have to run all the wires from the engine compartment down through by the hood latch and into the rubber grommet on the driver's side of the vehicle. I popped off those couple of plastic panels. I took off the panel that's right there on the door where you step in, and I also took off one more panel underneath just so I could have access to all of that stuff. And then I just kind of brought everything down through. I fished one through I would fish one through, and then I would tape another one and fish it back through. So I was just kind of going back and forth, and it was really, really easy to do. The nice part for this is because I had a connection point for my compressor underneath that plate where you step into the vehicle, and I was able to disconnect that and then start wrapping wire from on one side, pulling it through. Then I'd wrap wire on the other side and pull the other wires through. So it made it easier because I didn't have to try to find that hole in the grommet, but all of that was done relatively easily. Now, what I love about it is, I don't love it, but I like it because you have to wire everything together. So each component, each light is wired to an individual spot within the Auxbeam fuse box. And it's actual, you have to hand tighten the screws down, you have to tighten everything up. And then all I did was I taped and then ran all of my grounds together and connected them to the battery. And all that was fine. But there was the auxiliary power source that I needed to find. So what I did is I called my buddy Matt, because I always call Matt if I have a question, because he knows so much more than me. And what I did was just went and got a blade fuse connector, a blade fuse, I don't know what it's called, but I'll show you here in a second. And I just found the right fuse that I wanted to take out that I could replace, a 10 amp fuse, put it back in there, and kind of taped everything up, wired everything together. I did have to cut a couple pieces of plastic to make all of this work, and it wasn't absolutely necessary. I just wanted it to look really clean. And so when I was cutting, I was trying to be very careful that nothing was destroyed or messed up or any of that. But on the fuse box, I had to cut like a little notch out for where that blade fuse connector, I can't remember, adapter? I don't know why I can't think of the name of it. But I did have to cut a little piece so I could run that wire out and get that so I could set the fuse box back down. But the plan for that is just to have a rock solid option for all of my lights. And if I'm like glistening with sweat, which I think I am, it's because it's so hot in my garage and humid. And my car's hot and I'm sitting in front of it. I know it's all besides the point, but I feel like I'm sweating cats and dogs. Or is that raining cats and dogs? It doesn't even matter at this point because I'm too deep now to quit. But so all of that was for a purpose. So the Auxbeam controller, like I said, was super simple to install. There wasn't anything that was difficult. You do have to take plastic off. You're going to have to just mess with all of the components and get everything lined up the way you want it. But when you click the button, like you can hear the auxiliary switch, you can hear it like click on. It's just like a more solid component. Even the push button pad, like the push pad that I've installed, is just a more solid piece of equipment than the trigger system. So anybody who bought a trigger system, because I said they were great, I still believe they're great. I don't know if I just had one that was having a malfunction. I hope that's the case because I'd have to replace the one in the Power Wagon too. But if you had an issue with your trigger system, please leave that comment because I would love to know what issue that is, or if I'm just like a one-off. If it's something that's reoccurring, that would really suck. That would suck because I helped people buy those, and that wasn't my intention, but I was so sold on them. But the plan for the vehicle now, because this is going to be like predominantly like a solo trip, storm chasing, long range vehicle for me, is what I plan to do is I'm running an isolator off of my battery. I did just buy a new battery today. I bought 2 new batteries today. One for the rear, and it's going to go in the wheel well compartment next to the compressor. And then I bought a new one up here, so I had 2 brand new rock solid AGM batteries. And I'm going to be running an isolator off of my main battery through a 40 amp breaker, and that's going to run a power wire all the way back to my secondary battery, and that secondary battery will be charged off of my primary battery at all times. That'll run my fridge. That will power if I want like a fan, or if I have to charge any of my camera batteries, drone batteries, whatever that is, I will have that whole setup back there with USB ports and everything really looking clean, I hope, once I get everything installed. But that will be my setup in the back. That way it's always charging off of my main battery. When I'm driving, it's charging. And then, you know, I should have plenty of time, 8, 10, 12, at least hours of run time on my refrigerator. So the next day when I pick up, I can take off again. I know my buddy Matt, who also runs this same exact setup in his Toyota FJ. He has not had any issues with it, and he says his battery lasts for several days. So that is promising to know, but that is the plan with this, and that's why I'm kind of making this video, because A, I'm sorry if you bought a trigger system based on my recommendation. I don't think they suck yet, unless you're experiencing issues with yours too. And if you are, please let me know, because I have to get it out of the Power Wagon. But I just think maybe the connections were bad. Maybe it was losing that Bluetooth connection. I don't know. I really hope it's not a problem with the unit and it's just something that happened to me, but only time will tell. So this whole install only took me a couple of days, but that was because I was really taking my time, making sure that everything was clean and everything was set up the way that I wanted it, and I don't have to go back and touch it again. Now, the other piece of plastic that I cut is right next to the touchpad that turns on your lights. There is a wire that goes down to your left onto your driver's side, and it kind of cuts in through that fuse box right there. And there's a little tiny like oval that I took out of that corner just to have enough space to close that piece of plastic over the fuse box all the way, so it's not like jiggling or making any noise. And honestly, it looks really good. It does not look like I hacked it up, and I'm super happy with it. Now, what I did to connect, and this is where somebody will probably say something, and you probably should, because my wife will kill me when she hears this, but what I used was double-sided Velcro on, as you can imagine, if you've been here for any length of time, is on the back of the fuse box for the Auxbeam system. I put double-sided Velcro on there, and I kind of stuck it to the top of the fuse box lid, the main vehicle fuse box lid. And it does jiggle a little bit, but I'm super confident that it's not going to fall off. Because it's taller, I can't set it directly on top of the fuse box like I had the trigger system. So I had to make some concessions there in order to make all that work. Now, it was kind of a pain today because I was in and out of that fuse box so many times, but I think for the long term, it's going to work. I'm not concerned that it's going to fall off and rattle around. There's not a lot of space underneath the hood of that Subaru. It's really tough to find a solid location to mount anything under there. And at least here, I know that I'm safe, and even if it falls over or tilts, I'm not going to have any issues with it, like falling into the engine compartment or anything like that. So for me, I'm happy with that. What else was I going to say? I don't really know. But the the system setup is super solid. Oh, the double-sided Velcro, that's what kind of led me down that rabbit hole. So on the inside, the little control panel that you have that has your 6 switches on it, I tried to use some double-sided Velcro to lightly Velcro it to the spot where it is right now, but it just didn't work. I didn't want to ruin that upholstery because that's like the leather, pleather over plastic spot right next to your steering wheel. So I did have to go with some stronger 3M tape. I just put 2 strips on the back and I stuck it in there real nice and I held it firm for about 45 seconds. And you know, I'm shaking it now and it doesn't move at all. So it's definitely a solid option. The double-sided Velcro I used initially, it just didn't work. It wasn't going to be like a long-term solution. But I think what we're working with right now with the new Auxbeam controller, the isolator, the spare battery in the back, and that 40 amp breaker to kind of keep everything safe, that is really like a huge leap in the right direction for this vehicle, for us. Now, is that one battery going to be enough? The spare battery? I think. I don't know. It really depends. I don't know until I test it. Worst case scenario, I have another really good AGM battery for the Subaru, but I really don't think I'm going to have a ton of issues with it, or a ton of capacity issues, I should say. Now, once the other components arrive this week, I'm going to be installing the whole roof rack setup and getting all the complete final picture here. So I'm super excited about that, because at that point, then I can load everything up, keep the things in there that I want to keep in there, get locks. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited to share it with you guys. It's going to look really cool, but it's going to be super functional. And so far, the Prinsu rack, hands down my favorite thing I've done so far. And it's not leaking, which is so nice. But that's it. I kind of wanted to talk you through that a little bit. This is not a full install video. You guys know I hate doing those, but I wanted to let you know, especially if you bought a trigger system and it was because I mentioned it in the video. I hope your trigger system is working well, and I hope you never have issues with it like I did, but I had to go a different route, and let's see how this turns out. So, okay, that's enough. It's so hot in here. I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my Sunday, and I will see you guys next week.